everyone. My name is Tanya Davis, and I am really happy to be here today with Anne Bishop for an interview as part of the Atlantic Publishers Marketing Association Voices campaign to amplify 2S LGBTQ plus voices here in Atlantic Canada, in our books and publishing industry, and just writing in general. So this is the first interview. I'm speaking from Mi'kma'ki on Prince Edward Island, Epiquake, and I'm speaking with Anne from Nova Scotia, although I don't exactly know whereabouts are you today, Anne?
Near Falmouth.
Falmouth, okay.
And also Mi'kma'ki, of course.
Yeah, great. So yeah, I have a bunch of questions and we're going to chat books, and I'll just, for those of you, I'm sure a lot of you know Anne and her work, but I just have a little bio here as way of introduction. Anne Bishop has been an activist for 5 decades in organizations dedicated to local, international, environmental, food, fiber, racial, and LGBTQ plus justice. For just as long, she has made her living doing adult education, facilitation, research, writing, and editing, with a particular love for teaching equity and community leadership. She has co-authored 4 books on adult and popular education, 1 on the Canadian food system, and is the author of 2 books about allies: Becoming an Ally, Breaking the Cycle of Oppression in People, and Beyond Token Change, Breaking the Cycle of Oppression in Institutions. In 2019, she published her first novel, Under the Bridge. Anne and her partner are in the process of retiring from their small farm where they raise sheep, chickens, veggies, berries, and tree fruit. She has a passion for spinning and knitting wool, and I'm so happy to be here today on Zoom with Anne Bishop. Welcome.
Oh, me too. Thanks.
I've been reading. I have actually hard copies of 2 of your books right here. I have
Excellent.
and Becoming an Ally. And I had such a lovely time catching up on them. Of course, Becoming an Ally has been out for some years. It's in the 3rd edition.
Mm-hmm.
And Under the Bridge is 2019. I guess that's only 2 years old or so. And yeah, so how that, I mean, I was on your website also looking around, and I saw that you also self-published a fantasy fiction novel a few years. That was before Under the Bridge. Am I right?
No, that was my pandemic project.
Hey, that's a nice way to spend a pandemic.
I published my mother's memoirs, and
about the farm that she
about growing up on a farm in Ontario in the 20s and 30s. And I had so much fun doing it and learned so much. I thought, okay, I need to keep using these skills. Amazing. So yes, I had actually written the fantasy novel earlier when I was just beginning to learn to write fiction. In fact, I wrote it to see if I could actually stick to fiction for that long, like for a whole novel length. But then I decided last year to rewrite it and publish it. The little dragons.
Rowan Starsmith.
Rowan Starsmith is my fantasy pseudonym.
Your nom de plume.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And of course, since there are some other Anne Bishops publishing in the world, including one who does a lot of fantasy fiction.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, she has, I think, more than 20 novels.
Wow. Okay.
Once on her website, in her list of books, she had a note at the bottom that said, "I am not the Anne Bishop that wrote Becoming an Ally, and I can't help you with your term papers."
Wow, amazing. Because on your bio, you say, "I am not the Anne Bishop."
Anne Bishop who writes fantasy fiction.
Have you 2 ever corresponded? Have you ever been in touch?
Well, I wrote to her after that and said, "I am the Anne Bishop that wrote Becoming an Ally, and I'd be happy to have some kind of forwarding contact on your website."
Right.
But she never responded. And shortly afterwards, she did the legal process to copyright the name.
Okay, that's interesting.
Now,
I didn't know you could copyright a personal name.
I had no idea. In fact, I don't know if you can or not. Like, and I certainly don't know, since she's American, if it would, stick across borders.
Right.
But I thought, if I'm going to wander into publishing fantasy fiction, I'd better not challenge her on the name.
Yeah, you might as well avoid a potential court challenge.
Exactly.
Definitely take away some time from writing.
Exactly, definitely. It would also take up about how many times the money that one ever makes from writing.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Not the best
There,
investment.
there's also an Ann Bishop that writes cookbooks, and there's one that writes nursing textbooks.
Okay. It's a
I
popular.
get asked about those from time to time.
Oh, okay. And did you find it? You said a few minutes ago to see if you wanted to see if you could stick to the time it takes to write fiction. How did you find it writing fiction? As it like in the example of Under the Bridge or the fantasy fiction? Did you find it different than writing nonfiction?
Oh, yeah, very.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
What was the
nonfiction. I consider nonfiction, I mean, easy to write. Sure. I mean, it takes years, but if it isn't right in the text, it just means I'm not clear enough. So it's just a matter of being of thinking about it, working at it until you're perfectly clear, and then it's perfectly clear on the page too.
Right.
Fiction is, I find, much more complicated than that. You know, your characters, you're in a dialogue with them, and they have to be real to other people, and their motivations sometimes are clear to me, not to others. Like I found it much more complex. I mean, still do.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, because I guess you can't rely on facts, statistics, figures at all with fiction.
No, it has to be believable.
Yeah, yeah. And whereas nonfiction just inherently is believable because it's
Exactly.
Yeah.
Someone could sue you if it isn't.
Yes, that's true. Right. And with fiction, you can kind of make up whatever you like, but it is yeah, to draw the reader in, I guess requires a whole different set of skills. I haven't written much fiction. I think I would find I do find similar challenges. I find it hard to even write a short story, let alone a whole novel. But you did it twice so far.
Yes. Yeah. Well, actually, number 3 is sitting just over there on the corner of my desk.
Okay, in progress.
Yep.
Amazing.
Yep.
And is there any continuation of storylines from Under the Bridge, or is it a whole new piece of writing?
It's a whole new piece of writing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, actually, since we're talking about LGBTQ, as you know, Under the Bridge, it comes from my work as an anti-poverty activist and an adult educator. But this new novel comes out of an experience with a lesbian cooperative farm back in the late 70s.
Okay, that you were a part of, that you were involved in?
Yeah, well, not strictly speaking. There was a whole movement for lesbian cooperative housing in urban areas and lesbian cooperative farms in rural areas. Ours wasn't exactly that, but it was certainly inspired by so yeah, it comes out of that experience.
Okay, amazing.
And I couldn't resist. I couldn't resist. I've called it Dykelands.
Well, I can't wait to read it.
I can't wait till you read it too.
It's a process. When you worked on Under the Bridge, how long were you working on that novel?
I started it in 2009, so 10 years.
Okay. And when I was reading it, I could see a lot of threads between your work as an educator, as an anti-poverty activist, as a social justice activist. I could see how that work informed the characters in your novel and what they were struggling with. So people who are listening who haven't read it yet, the synopsis, it follows a woman named Lucy, who, I don't know if you said her age exactly, but in her 50s, 60s area.
60, yeah, I was thinking.
And she's experiencing homelessness as a result of stress and PTSD from some long buried trauma that she experienced when she was younger. And as far as I could tell from all the work that she did as a social activist and as the anti-poverty activist. And Lucy to me seemed like a character who she was just really affected by the pain in the world that is so hard to solve and takes constant work, and it can really run people down. And you mentioned about, some people break open with all this stress, and then they emerge a new people, and some like stronger, and some of us are brittle, and that breaks us down. And so my experience of reading about Lucy is that she was kind of working through that with the help of a lot of friends. And I thought the novel really celebrated friendship and community like bonds, especially within social justice circles, queer circles, and activism. One of the things I noticed about the theme in the book that emerges at a certain point early in the novel, Lucy meets Bera, who is a young woman struggling recently with homelessness, especially because she's a queer woman and her parents find out, and then she's out of the house. And so her and Lucy strike a friendship that at first seems unlikely to me, given their differences in life and their age differences. And then they really help each other. Lucy helps Vera. She opens her mind and her world to new concepts like oppression, like equality, and she sees Bera have these moments where she's learning. And then Bera in return helps Lucy take care of herself and take her medication and eat her food and do things that she needs to do. But I was really struck by the intergenerational friendship of that, and the big age difference. And I was just wondering how important, I am imagining that you see an importance in intergenerational relationships in queer communities and also in social justice communities. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think because people who get involved in social justice work or passions, and people, well, maybe I don't think this is so much now, but certainly in my generation, when you came out as queer, and we never would have used that word, by the way.
Yeah.
It was still an insult.
Yeah.
It often meant breaking with your biological family. Both of those things did,
Mm-hmm.
and to some degree or other, sometimes completely. And so, you need family, right? You need community, but you need more than that. Like you need friends who will be there for you, right? Who really solid friendships.
Mm-hmm.
In the LGBTQ community, we often talk about chosen family. Well, the same is true for social justice activists.
Yeah, because
If your politics aren't the same as your family's anymore, right?
it can be quite alienating.
Mm-hmm.
And it is tireless work that seemingly has no end. So you hear a lot about burnout and just general fatigue for fighting the good fight like that. And people need each other.
Yeah, Lucy is speaking for me when she talks about when she never would have imagined when she was that age still.
Yeah. I could see there was a couple times where I wondered how you were involved, how your characters represented parts of you. And Lucy in particular, there was another point in the book where Lucy was recognizing when, I think it was Patty, or she can't, I have it here, she can't look at a former student without remembering the moment the lights went on, when they understand it's the world that's upside down, not them. And how, that can be both refreshing to realize there's a bigger thing going on. It's not just your problem. It's that, it's systemic, and also overwhelming, because once we realize that there are large systems that we're dealing with, we know that it's going to take a lot of work to change it. But I was wondering if you've seen that in your work as a teacher, an educator, if you've recognized that moment with your students.
Oh yeah, that's kind of what has kept me at it for 50 years. Are those moments, right? When people just, I don't know. Well, it happened to me. And then when I was in my mid-20s, and then, I just kept wanting to make it happen for other people, right? That I don't know, sometimes people talk about scales dropping off of their eyes or some kind of curtain being whisked aside or
Right. Yeah, and then you can't not see it after that.
which can be a problem too,
Mhm.
right? Especially if your circles, if your friends, your family are built around other things.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, that can be a real issue.
Yeah, and then, I mean, we get into a place of ignorance versus willful ignorance, because ignorance is it's hard and it's difficult, but there's a degree of something in it that's not our fault. But as soon as we see something that we can't deny, then if we continue to deny it, that's willful on our part.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Mhm.
yeah, but it's a hard break, right? Um, I learned my social justice politics from a teacher. And later I took part in a PhD thesis that was looking at her methods
Okay.
and how many people completely changed their lives after that course.
Wow.
And we had individual interviews and then we had a focus group. There were 16 of us all together, but we had 2 focus groups of 8. And at one point in my group of 8, we discovered that every one of us had gone to her at some point and expressed our rage that she had made us see these things and we couldn't unsee them.
Wow. Okay.
So each of us kind of came to a point where we realized, uh-oh, this has irrevocably changed my life. How dare you do this to me?
Do you have any words to offer after you approached her about that? Was she happy for you?
Oh
Or-
yeah, no, well, no, she was from Ethiopia and she was quite new to dealing with privileged white North Americans.
Okay.
So the rage at leaving our comfortable ignorance behind was new to her. And she later she did a real rethink of her methods and worked out some ways to make them a little more gradual
Mhm.
and gentle, because I think, you see, I was in the first year she taught in North America. And I think we all caught her by surprise that we were so upset
Mm.
to have our comfortable bubble popped.
Right. Wow. Well, it sounds like some effective teaching.
Do you know one lovely thing that happened at the launch of Under the Bridge, the Toronto launch? She came, she's 95, I guess. Anyway, she came to the launch and she taught me. I used her methods all my life. And after that, and I have passed them on to other people. And also present was a woman from Ryerson University
Mhm.
who has been using her students doing community development work in the Parkdale area of Toronto. And actually the same program, that I learned from this teacher from Ethiopia, and then I've passed on, and now it's being used by this group of students in Parkdale. It's like a sort of a continual, like multi-generations of the same community learning style, right? Or learning process, the same program. And so I was able to introduce the 2 of them. And then I had to leave and go on stage and launch Under the Bridge.
Yeah.
And the whole time, except when we were actually doing the program, the 2 of them were in the audience, just talking.
Oh my gosh.
It was just lovely. It was like bringing something full circle.
Wow, that's so great. I love it when that can happen, because we don't always get the chance to keep up a relationship with our teachers who have meant so much to us. And so to get to see them again and also tell them that is that's
Yeah.
a beautiful legacy of teacher-student relationships.
Well, I've been in touch with her all along. In fact, when I adapted the program for grassroots leaders, There's grassroots leaders. I have so many books here that.
Yes, you do.
This one was also published by Fernwood. Grassroots Leaders Building Skills.
Yep.
This is the program
Okay.
that gave me my social justice politics. And this was the version of it that Jean Fay and I did out of Henson College in the early 90s. And when the funding ran out and we had to close the program down, we published it so that, and with all, Fernwood kindly agreed to my plan to make it spiral bound so that you can just take the handouts, right? Every page like that is a handout, and you just slap it on the platen of a photocopier and off you go, right?
There you go. Yeah, that's easier.
So
than the other
it's
book.
like someone could pick up this book and reproduce that course.
Hmm. Well, it seems like you've been doing so much work for so long that you're building and will be leaving quite a large legacy behind as well. I'm very happy to be talking to you today. And
Well, thank you.
I mean, I lived in Nova Scotia for a long time, and I remember seeing Becoming an Ally in particular on lots of bookshelves, and then it was the subject of many discussions within my circles.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and it's nice that you've managed to update the editions a few times as well. And do you think that we've gotten anywhere with becoming allies in our world today? You wrote that in 1994. Was that the first print?
Yes, 1994 was the first edition. Second edition was, is it 2004? And then 2016. I started I went over to have lunch with my publishers around the Christmas season, and we started the conversation about doing a new edition. Okay. And because Allies are really having a moment right now because of Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. And because of the discovery of the residential school graves and the Mi'kmaq fisheries dispute. Mm-hmm. People are, it's been an interesting book. It's had these little rises and then times when it drops out of sight. Mm-hmm. But people are interested in learning to become an ally right now. I've had more requests for workshops and presentations in the last year than I've had in goodness, probably the previous decade.
Wow.
Number one, thanks to Zoom, because I've been able to do it nationally.
Right.
But number two, because of what's happening in the world, right? It's mm-hmm. So we're talking about doing a new edition, but I really am getting old. Like I hear younger people who are talking about this and working in this, and I realize I'm kind of irrevocably falling behind. And so the reins of this new edition need to somehow be passed on, and we're tossing around ideas of doing something collaborative, like developing a website or a Facebook group or something that can start a discussion and pull in a lot of the younger people that are picking up the torch of becoming an ally and carrying it forward. Mm-hmm. And it needs to be a multiracial, multi-gendered, national origin group, multi-religious group. So we're kind of throwing around, not just me sitting down and spending a winter writing a new edition of Becoming an Ally, but we're going to try and do something creative with it to move forward. But back to your question, it's hard to answer that one because so much has changed. Well, especially when it comes to sexual orientation. When I lost my last full-time job with benefits, it was in 1998, and I was asked if I would like to take my small collection of pension money with me and invested in a locked RSP, or would I like to leave it in the institution? And I took it with me because I thought we would not make it to the point where my partner could inherit my pension within my lifetime.
Wow.
I mean, now we could.
Fair enough. There was it didn't seem possible for a while. It didn't.
Exactly. I mean, that in that area, there's been tremendous movement. We could be married now if we chose to be.
Mhm.
We feel married enough, but if we wanted that,
Yeah.
we could.
Yeah. De facto
Um,
married.
and things are moving, right? Like in the whole field of employment equity, in anti-racism, I've heard the word structural used in general conversation, and systemic, again, more in the last year than probably in the previous decade. Like, these conversations are moving and things are moving and things are changing. On the other hand, it's interesting, Beyond Token Change has only sold, becoming an ally, by the time we launched the third edition, it had sold 30,000 copies. Beyond Token Change has probably sold 1,000 copies since it was published in 2005. But Beyond Token Change was where I tried to deal with that structural reality, right?
Mhm.
Like, what does it mean that oppression is structural?
Right. Because a lot of
And
change needs to happen at that level.
yeah,
Yes.
and I looked at, it grew out of my master's thesis, which looked at institutional responses to accusations of racism. And so I had studied how institutions resist change. And I came to the conclusion that institutions are masterful at token change.
Yes.
Like, each institution has its basic, its core of what it was made for, right? I don't know, I have images of a clock, that was made by a master clockmaker like centuries ago.
Mhm.
Clockmaker's gone, the mantle it originally sat on is gone, but the clock ticks on and on and on, doing what it does, right? And or I think of the way a baseball is made, with a little cork core, and then it's wrapped with tons and tons of string, and then it has this leather cover. So if there's a crookedness in that core, then each layer of string has it too. And you can change the cover, but if you're going to change the core, you have to unravel all the string, right?
Right. And that's a lot of work.
Yeah, and institutions are awfully good at distinguishing what they can change without touching the core.
How they can do the least while looking like they're doing the most.
Exactly.
We
Yes.
saw a lot of that with, we see a lot of virtue signaling that way with, people putting up a Black Lives Matter sign on their Facebook for a day, or I stand with whoever, like now it's Ukraine, or without needing to do much, or thinking that they need to do much more than that to appear progressive.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And institutions are even better at it.
Yeah.
And when you actually touch the core, it, because there's a huge backlash.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to decide, as the institution needs to decide, are we really going to change, or are we going to backlash? And then there are certain mechanisms for backlash, right? The probably the most oft used and effective is the scapegoat, where you pick either the person that's trying to make the change or somebody who looks really outrageously like a dinosaur. And you ceremonially kick them out with great fanfare and
Right.
all kinds of insult. And then you say, there, look, we've dealt with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. As if that's all it takes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Changing language too is just so common,
Mm-hmm.
right? And but really, underneath there are centuries of wealth that has been accumulated by by using people, stealing land, stealing labor, making the kinds of distinctions on gender and race and that need to be made to keep that whole system in place. And really, when you get down to change, it means changing that. And I'm not one of those people that think we can save the world within capitalism, right? By selling alternative cleaning products.
Right. Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
solar panels,
Yeah. Yeah. It's not going to fix something that it broke.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That started out. Yeah. That started out. I had one of the young people I work with. I am a member of and work with the local. It's now changed its name, but it was the West Hants Black Lives Matter.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the young women in there won't let anyone, politicians and institutions that we go and talk to, love to say, yes, I know it's broken. And she always says, no, it's not broken. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do.
That's true. Yeah, it's important to make that distinction. And I think, if we're speaking about words and writing, words, and on one hand, they can flitter away and not mean that much, but on the other hand, they have a lot of power. They can be really violent and they can be really persuasive. And I know you said, I think it was at the beginning of becoming an ally, that you can get grumpy. I don't think you use the word grumpy, but annoyed at words, like you see their limitations and they get co-opted. Like
Yes.
in this case, maybe an institution will use the word "we're fighting for justice," or use words that social justice fighters actually use and mean, and that words can get taken away, and that's one of. So it's like it's hard to work with them, but at the end of the day, when you're writing books, that's what you have to work with, is something to reconcile.
Yeah. Yes. And yes, I feel, well, I guess I said it in becoming an ally, I have such a double feeling about words. I love them. I love writing. I love crafting language. And I feel it's truly the pen is mightier than the sword. Like ideas change things, much more than war or anything physical. But on the other hand, yes, I listen to a spin doctor, using exactly my language, or I just listen to the co-optation and I think, another word I have to throw out, another word I have to throw out. I guess I have to throw them all out. Now what do I do?
Yeah, and I guess the thing about that words can make change and at least affect people's ideas. But then we need to step beyond words and make an action. So like the analysis can be one thing, and then analysis also, you've said analysis to strategy, and then from strategy to action. Words are a big part of it. Words are my tool as well. I obviously also love words and really rely on them, but it seems to me that you do strike a balance of also work in the community and activism work that is still, you use words, but you're also out in the community. And that's, does that balance help you reconcile the limitations of words?
I think so. And I didn't, all of my writing has, not all, I only started to even see myself as a writer after becoming an ally, because most of my writing has grown out of something else. It's been a tool for something else. It's been filling a gap that I saw for my students, or that's what becoming an ally was. I couldn't find that textbook, so I wrote it. And that was about the 4th time I had done that. Writing has always been out of something for something, part of something. It was only after becoming an ally that I even began to see myself as a writer, not just somebody who wrote in order to do something else.
Right.
And Under the Bridge, I wrote as a writer because I love fiction. Our mom, I grew up rural, but our mom used to drive us into the city library every week.
Amazing.
So and turn us loose in the children's section to pick our own books. So even before I could read them, I learned the delight of walking out with like an armload of 3 books and all excited about reading them. And mostly fiction. Like I love reading fiction.
Same.
So it was then that I challenged myself to, okay, you love reading it. You've always wanted to write it. Once when I was doing international development, I had several near-death experiences doing international development. But in one of them, I was kind of embarrassed afterwards because I didn't think, my family, I didn't think of my family and my loved ones. I thought, I can't die now. I haven't written a novel yet.
I'm gonna say you could just not tell them that, but you just said it out loud. So I guess.
Well, I've said it. But yes, I was a little shocked that was what came into my head when I really thought I was going to lose my life. Was, wait a minute, I haven't written a novel yet.
And did that spur you on when you got back to a safer place in front of a computer or a writing desk?
No, that was in the mid 80s before I had even met a computer yet.
You tucked it away for some years, and
I tucked it away, and in 2009 I finally decided. Well, actually, it was after Beyond Token Change was published. I kind of had that now or never moment.
Okay.
I was 55. I thought, if you're going to write a novel in your life, you have to start learning now, or else you have to forget it.
Yeah, because it takes a long time to write a novel. And
yeah, I took Susan Haley's course at the Adult Learning Center at Acadia 3 times over, and I took the Humber creative writing distance course. And it takes a while to learn to write fiction at all, and then it takes a while a long time, 10 years to produce a novel.
Right.
But that's the first time I wrote for the sake of writing. Because I wanted to produce something, a written something. Before that, everything has been part of something else.
Did you find it joyful in some way?
Yeah. I mean, as I'm sure it has its moments when you think, what am I doing this for?
Yes. Yeah. I haven't attempted a novel at all, but even as I work on because I write a lot for performance, and then I have a folder on my desktop that's for a manuscript eventually. And I often have that thought, like, why, what am I doing? What is this for? Especially when you're sitting writing, some just thoughts from your head, or whether it's a poetry or fiction or a made up story. It is hard to sometimes remember that there's a larger purpose to it than your own task. I remind myself once in a while that books to me are one of the greatest joys of life. It's one of my favorite things to do is to read books. So if I could contribute that's a worthwhile way to spend your time.
Yeah. And there's certainly one member of one of my writing groups once quit and said to the rest of us, there are millions and millions of people out there that don't write.
Right. That's true. Many, many people.
Also, when on the first edition of Becoming an Ally, when I was coming down the home stretch of the final edits, I really came close to, it was winter, I came close to taking it out in the backyard and lighting a match to it.
Wow.
And when I said that to Errol Sharp, my publisher, he said, well, we would have put it in a little tiny urn and put it on a shelf in the office with an inscription that said, to authors who crack.
Yeah, and then other authors who could come in and be like, oh, I hope that's not me.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could have been an inspiration for keeping going, but I think you are, because you actually did keep going, and now your book for many.
And you have those moments, right? But for the most part, it's just it's not so much pleasure, it's just such a deep satisfaction.
Yeah, not always pleasurable, but but I agree. That's a nice way to put it. In the same way that we may not always be happy, but we could have an abiding joy.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah. When people, that endless conversation our culture has about being happy, I often think, why? There are things a lot deeper than happiness.
It's true. Happiness is maybe one of the easiest feelings, and so people seek it.
Yeah.
I was struck by, this kind of relates to, what's the point of writing or telling stories, in Under the Bridge, when Lucy and Judith, so Judith is the legal aid lawyer and an old friend of Lucy's, are having a conversation. They realize that they have a lot of love for each other, and yet they don't know much about each other, and that they've kept a lot within themselves, which is of course a source of their pain. They have a lot of pent up trauma and old emotions that they haven't processed, and stories they haven't told people, including their dear friends. And they both admit loneliness, and then this wondering that if we told our stories, like, let's tell each other our stories, and maybe that will help with our loneliness. And I think about that a lot, of like why we write, why we tell stories, and that at the base there's a seeking of connection,
Mhm.
and so that we can abate some of that loneliness.
Yeah. And speaking of social change, stories are, maybe it's because I'm a reader and a writer, but I see stories as being um, the crucial, deepest level of making social change, because it's the stories we tell ourselves, right, that interpret everything we see.
Mhm. Yeah.
So they're
And,
extremely important.
when we hear stories about other people, they become um, real. People become real, and not just statistics or news we hear about.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then it's, I guess, making that connection. It seems to me that connection and separation is something that you think about a lot, and that you write about, and how, at base, separation leads to hierarchy and competition. If we acknowledge that we're connected and our actions have influence on other people, that is a real foundation for working for social change.
Hmm.
Mhm. The vast network of life.
Hmm. Yeah.
Well, I definitely could talk way longer. I have endless questions that I didn't even get to, but I think we'll wrap up this recording part of it for the viewers who are tuned in, and thank you everyone for listening, and thank you, Anne, so much for your generosity of spirit and sharing your stories, and letting us into your home with your view of your dollhouse and your books. Your old farmhouse. I was waiting for an animal to walk in and lie down on that mat I see over there in the corner, but
That was one of my animals.
Oh, is that an old sheep?
Yeah, he was our one ram that had to go because his temperament turned
Oh,
nasty,
wow. Well,
but his fleece was too lovely to me, so now he's on my study floor.
that's lovely. I mean, that's the circle of life. It's good that you could you still have a part of him. Well, yeah, thank you so much. I had such a lovely time reading Under the Bridge, and refamiliarizing myself with becoming an ally. And I know I'm excited to hear about your lesbian farm commune book, Dykelands. Is that you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So good luck with getting that to print. I'll keep an eye out. And again, just so lovely to talk to you.
Well, thank you. It's a real privilege to be chosen to take part in this series. I'm really delighted. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.